We need to have a very honest, very direct conversation about what is happening to the Los Angeles Lakers in this semifinal series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Because the situation has moved well past uncomfortable and arrived at something that deserves to be called by its accurate name. This is not a competitive series that has gone sideways at the wrong moments. This is not a collection of close games where momentum shifted at unfortunate times and the wrong team happened to be holding the ball when the clock expired. This is a systematic, margin by margin, possession by possession dismantling of a franchise that entered this matchup with genuine reasons for optimism and is now staring at the most one-sided three-game stretch LeBron James has endured in years.
Disappointing, and it's a fact like you being down 3-0, obviously, but I mean, you know, we still got life, and that's all you can ask for, and we got to be much better on Monday.
Against a team that does not appear to have a ceiling that this Lakers roster can reach.
Let me give you the complete picture before anything else, because the complete picture is the only honest foundation for this conversation. The Lakers have actually done a number of specific things correctly in this series. That is not a consolation framing designed to soften what follows. It is a factual statement that makes the overall outcome more disorienting, not less, when you examine everything together. In Game 1, the Lakers were within 4 points at the 6-minute mark of the third quarter. That is a competitive basketball game. That is not a blowout developing in slow motion. That is two teams separated by a possession and a half with meaningful time remaining and the outcome genuinely uncertain. They held halftime leads in each of the last two games. Halftime leads in a series where they are now down 3-0 with their season effectively finished before Monday's game has even been scheduled. Marcus Smart has done a genuinely impressive defensive job on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is about to become the back-to-back league MVP. SGA is averaging just 21 points per game in this series with 5.5 assists and only 45% shooting from the field. He is also more than doubling the next Thunder player in turnovers. Read that carefully.
The MVP is, 18, 22, 7 of 20 tonight, and they've kicked our ass 3 straight games. They're an incredible basketball team.
The Lakers have meaningfully contained the best player in professional basketball operating at his highest level right now. They have been competitive during extended stretches of all 3 games. They have done real, measurable, documentable things correctly. And the Thunder have won every single game by a minimum of 18 points. 18 points is the floor of the margin, not the average. The floor. Not one of these 3 games has been remotely competitive when the final buzzer sounds, despite the Lakers doing legitimate work in multiple individual periods across multiple games. That gap between what the process looks like during stretches and what the final score reflects every single time is the entire explanation for why Oklahoma City is the most maddening, most suffocating, most complete team in professional basketball right now. And I want to be precise about why that is, because the instinct is to point at SGA and call it a superstar problem. It is not a superstar problem. It is much more structurally complicated and much more difficult to solve than that. The Lakers head coach said it directly after the game, and he deserves credit for the honesty of the assessment, even as the assessment itself confirms that resistance to this Thunder team is essentially futile at this moment. He said Oklahoma City can adjust like that with a snap. They need shooting on the floor. They have players who provide it immediately. They need multiple wing defenders simultaneously. They have an entire roster of them. They need 2 bigs in the lineup at once. They can deploy that configuration without sacrificing anything meaningful on either end. There is no personnel call that exposes a gap. There is no matchup to exploit that the Thunder cannot cover by reaching into a bench that is deeper and more versatile than anything the Lakers have available to answer it with. He called them a terrific basketball team before the series began. He said he still believes the Lakers can beat them. That first statement is completely accurate. That second statement is where the honest acknowledgement of reality ends and the professional obligation to maintain competitive posture takes over. Because nothing across 3 games of evidence, nothing in the margin of any of those 3 final scores, and nothing in the betting market that has Oklahoma City as a 10 to 12 point road favorite to close this out on Monday supports the idea that this Lakers team has a realistic path to winning 1 game in this series, let alone 4 consecutive games against this opponent. Let us be very direct about what a 0-3 series deficit actually means in the context of NBA playoff history, because the numbers here are not ambiguous and they are not open to optimistic reinterpretation. Teams that fall into a 0-3 hole in the NBA playoffs do not come back. The historical rate of recovery is so close to zero that characterizing it as a long shot would be a generous framing. It is closer to an impossibility dressed in the language of professional obligation to keep playing the games that remain on the schedule. The betting market has processed this reality with complete clarity. Oklahoma City is a 10 to 12 point favorite on the road to close out the sweep on Monday. On the road against a team playing in its home building with its entire season ending if it loses. That is how comprehensively the market has assessed the gap between these two teams, and there is no credible argument to construct against that assessment based on what the first three games have shown. Now let us talk about LeBron James specifically, because this conversation demands that we engage with it honestly and completely rather than retreating into either uncritical reverence or unfair dismissal.
I mean, obviously we got everything, shit. Everything and more to beat a team like this, so we gotta be at our best on Monday.
His individual numbers in Game 3 were 19 points on 7 of 19 shooting. His team lost by 23 points and dropped to 0-3 in a series where halftime leads have not translated into competitive final scores. He is 41 years old.
This team in game, because of their personnel, can just adjust like that. They need shooting on the floor, great. They need multiple wing defenders on the floor, great. They need two bigs on the floor, great. They're a terrific basketball team. I said that before the series. Been very impressed with them. Still think we can beat them, but we got to be better.
He is operating without Luka Doncic, who was the primary offensive engine this roster was constructed around, for exactly the kind of deep playoff run Los Angeles envisioned when the season began. He is doing what he can do with what he has available, and that context matters and should be part of every honest assessment of his performance in this series. But here is where the conversation becomes genuinely revealing rather than simply contextual. After Game 3, after the 19-point performance on 7 of 19 shooting, after watching his team fall to 0-3 in a series where no game has been within 18 points at the final buzzer, LeBron was asked about his emotional state in the aftermath of the loss. His answer communicated a level of equanimity about the situation that is difficult to characterize as the competitive fire that defined the earlier chapters of his career. He said that whether you are 21, 31, or 41, you approach competition the same way. The framing was calm. The presentation was measured. The posture was that of someone who has processed the situation and arrived at a place of acceptance rather than fury. The two players who set the standard for what elite playoff mentality looks like at the absolute peak of the competition, the two names that define what winning in May and June requires internally, would not have been sitting in a post-game press conference following a 23-point loss to go down 0-3 in a playoff series, projecting that kind of equanimity. That is not a statement about what emotional state is more productive or more useful to the team's actual chances. It is a statement about what the posture communicates regarding where the internal compass is pointing. When falling into a 0-3 hole with no competitive game in any of them does not register as a moment that generates visible competitive outrage, the series has already concluded in the place that determines outcomes before bodies hit the floor. LeBron was also asked whether this group had any concrete, specific ideas about how to actually win a basketball game in this series. His answer was that they have everything and more to beat a team like this, and that they need to be at their best on Monday. That response, delivered with that score line accumulating across 3 games, communicates something important about the gap between what this Lakers team believes about its own ceiling and what 3 games of evidence has demonstrated about the actual matchup. They do not have everything required to beat this Thunder team.
We have a guy that averaged 37 a game. What did he average, 35 this year? 33 and a half?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you asking?
Okay, well.
When you play against the world champions, having a guy that averages 34 6 and 8 and 8 and 9, whatever the hell that's special.
That is not an indictment of effort or character or professional commitment. It is an accurate assessment of roster construction, of the circumstances surrounding Doncic's absence, and of what Oklahoma City has built over the past several years. If the sweep completes on Monday as the betting market projects, this will be the fourth sweep of LeBron James's career. Sit with that number alongside everything else his career contains because the combination is genuinely striking. 4 championships, 4 finals MVP awards, a statistical legacy that occupies the absolute summit of what the modern professional game has produced, and 4 sweeps across that same career. If Monday goes as projected, he will have been swept more times than any other Hall of Fame player in the history of the league, except for Shaquille O'Neal and the players most closely associated with Shaq's dynasty era. That is a historical footnote that the broader legacy conversation around LeBron does not spend significant time examining, and yet it is accurate and it sits in the permanent record, regardless of how uncomfortable it is to place alongside the championships and the individual awards. The most important mitigating context for this particular sweep is real and significant and must be part of any honest accounting. Luka Doncic is absent. The roster was constructed and the playoff strategy was designed around a player who is not available to execute it. A 41-year-old LeBron James without his primary offensive partner, facing the deepest and most positionally versatile roster in the Western Conference, is a fundamentally different competitive equation than what Los Angeles envisioned when this series began. Context does not change the margin of any of the 3 losses or the 0-3 series record, but it accurately frames what those results reflect and what they do not reflect about this Lakers group as currently assembled with all available personnel. The question that is already beginning before Monday's game is even played is what comes after it. Because the sweep, if it arrives as projected, triggers one of the most consequential offseason conversations the NBA has had in years.
I think about, to be honest, and just for me personally, going forward with the game of basketball, got a lot to think about.
And at the center of that conversation is a question that nobody on the Lakers podium wanted to address directly, but that the moment made unavoidable. LeBron was asked whether it would cross his mind or any of his teammates' minds that Monday could represent the final game for some of them in a Lakers uniform. His answer was to redirect. He said you do not really talk about that you focus on the moment at hand and go from there. That is an understandable human response to an uncomfortable question at an uncomfortable post-game moment. But the question does not go away because the person being asked it chose to redirect. It becomes more urgent after Monday, regardless of what the score says when the final buzzer sounds, because the off-season decisions that follow this series will define not just the future of the Lakers, but the future of multiple franchises simultaneously. The betting market has already begun processing these decisions in preliminary terms. Current market pricing has the Los Angeles Lakers as roughly a 70% implied favorite to retain LeBron James for next season. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the franchise where LeBron has the deepest historical roots and where his son Bronny was most recently playing, sit at approximately 15%. Those probabilities will shift significantly after Monday depending on what signals emerge from LeBron's camp about his intentions and what the Lakers organization communicates about its plans for roster reconstruction around him if he stays. The question of whether LeBron James has one more dramatic July in him, one more franchise-altering decision that reshapes the competitive landscape of the league the way his previous major moves have done at each significant juncture of his career, is genuinely and completely open.
How's that possible? How are you going to explain that to me? They had to win tonight? If that's the case, just let us know so we don't show up for the game. Just give them a win. But that was not fair tonight.
He has made decisions before that the market did not anticipate until the moment the announcement arrived. The pattern of his career across multiple decades suggests that the comfortable assumption, the retained superstar staying where he currently is because the market assigns it a 70% probability, is not always the right framework for predicting what LeBron James actually decides to do when July arrives and the real conversations begin. Monday's game in Los Angeles is not a game with a meaningful competitive outcome attached to it in the traditional sense. The Thunder are double-digit road favorites. The historical precedent for overcoming a 0-3 deficit in the NBA playoffs is as close to non-existent as any outcome in professional sports gets. Oklahoma City has won each of the first 3 games by at least 18 points, despite the Lakers holding halftime leads in the last 2 and keeping the game within 4 points at the 6-minute mark of the third quarter in Game 1. The competitive story of this series is already written, and the final chapter reads the same way the first 3 have. What Monday determines is not whether the Lakers can complete the historically improbable comeback that has never been accomplished in NBA playoff history. What Monday determines is the precise starting point for the next chapter of one of the most compelling ongoing stories in professional basketball. That chapter involves decisions about LeBron James's future that will define how the Lakers and several other franchises approach the coming months. It involves questions about roster construction and organizational direction that the Lakers will need to answer regardless of what LeBron ultimately decides. And it involves the beginning of what could be one more dramatic summer in a career that has produced more dramatic summers than anyone else in the modern era of the sport. The head coach called Oklahoma City a terrific basketball team and said he still thinks his group can beat them. The first statement is accurate and honest and reflects a genuine understanding of what this Thunder roster represents. The second statement is what professional obligation requires you to say when your team still has a game to play and cameras are pointed at you, and the alternative is conceding the series publicly before it is officially concluded. Both statements can be true simultaneously without either of them being dishonest about what they are actually communicating. The Thunder are a terrific basketball team. They have no weaknesses that this Lakers roster can exploit. They can adjust like that when any adjustment is required. They have shooting, they have size, they have wing defenders, they have depth, they have a superstar who is being somewhat contained and still winning every game by 18 points or more because the system does not require him to be at his absolute peak to produce these margins. The Lakers have done real things right. Marcus Smart has competed at a high level against the league's best player. The halftime leads were genuine. The 4-point deficit late in the third quarter of Game 1 was genuine. None of it has produced a final score within 18 points across 3 consecutive games. And on Monday in Los Angeles, with everything that comes after riding on whatever unfolds in those 48 minutes, the Thunder are going to finish what they started and begin the process of answering whether they have what it takes to go even further in this postseason. For the Lakers, Monday begins something different. It begins the conversations that LeBron deflected in his post-game availability. It begins the market movement away from the preliminary 70-30 split on his future. It begins the organizational reckoning that follows any playoff exit, and particularly one that arrives in sweep form against the team widely regarded as the best in the Western Conference. The road to whatever comes next starts Monday in Los Angeles, and it is going to move faster and with more consequence than any of the 3 games that preceded it.